Welcome back to this channel for practice problems for actuarial exams. My name is Krzysztof Ostaszewski. You can find information about me at smarturl.it/Jedi. You can find my advice on how to pass actuarial exams at smarturl.it/pass. I direct the actuarial program at Illinois State University. You can find information about it at smarturl.it/actuary. If you would like to make a tax-deductible donation to support our students, please go to smarturl.it/help-ISU-actuary. Here is a practice problem for exam FM on financial mathematics. On a given day, the discount rate is 3.65%, the prime rate is 3.55%, the LIBOR is 3.30%, the federal funds rate is 3.25%, and the federal funds target rate is 3.20%. On the same day, Bank XYZ's reserve balance held at the Federal Reserve is lower than the reserve requirements, and Bank XYZ needs to borrow funds from those member institutions of the Federal Reserve who have excess funds in their reserve. Let X be the rate at which Bank XYZ borrows from these excess funds. Determine X. The short answer is that you should know that the rate at which member banks that need reserves borrow from those who have excess reserves to meet the Federal Reserve requirement, the rate at which they borrow is called the federal funds rate. That's given as 3.25%, so that's the answer. But let's go over the choices that we have here. So the discount rate is the rate at which member banks borrow from the Federal Reserve. And you may wonder, well, why doesn't this bank just borrow from Federal Reserve? Because at least historically, until the 2008 credit crisis, that was the last resort. This is not the standard policy. They should borrow from other banks first before they run for help to Federal Reserve. In this problem also you'll see that borrowing at the discount rate is less beneficial than borrowing at the federal funds rate. That's not necessarily the case in reality. So anyway, a discount rate is not the answer. The prime rate is the rate that banks charge their best customers for business loans. That rate is significantly higher than the federal funds rate. The federal funds rate is just a special deal for reserves held with the Federal Reserve. And that money is basically guaranteed in every way because the balance is held by Federal Reserve and it's not going to disappear in any way. And on top of that, if the money were to disappear, Federal Reserve can create money out of nothing, so what's the big deal? But anyway, business loans are risky. It's a different situation. And business loans in the sense of loaning to businesses that actually do something real, not finance like banks. Not trying to put down finance. Finance has its role. Finance is supposed to be the servant of the real economy and the helper. But the real economy is the one that really serves the customers, that meets people's needs. Banks, insurance companies, and other financial institutions are just their servants, their little helpers. LIBOR is an average of US dollar denominated certificates of deposit rates at certain London, United Kingdom banks. It's not applicable here. Federal funds rate is the rate at which member banks borrow reserves from each other to meet the reserve requirements imposed on them by the Federal Reserve. Federal funds target rate is the rate for member banks borrowing reserves from each other that is suggested but not imposed by the Federal Reserve. It's the rate that the Federal Reserve thinks should be the rate for federal funds, but it's not imposed. The actual federal funds rate is at which the borrowing happens. So the rate on borrowing reserve balances from other member banks is the federal funds rate, which is given as 3.25%. So this is the rate at which Bank XYZ will borrow. This is answer B. Please remember this is copyrighted material. The problem itself belongs to the Society of Actuaries. The solution is mine. Good luck in your studies and good luck on the test.